Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for How She Does It, where we talk about all things women, money, and power. I'm Karen Feinerman. When you hear about someone like my guest, Debra Liu, and her extraordinary career, and I got to just tell you what that career is, after business school, she and her husband headed for Silicon Valley. She took a job at the then very small PayPal, which was acquired by eBay a week after she joined. She worked on the integration team and ultimately became the director of end-to-end buyer experience product management. And it wasn't long before a not so small but not so big company called Facebook came calling. And she was there for almost 12 years in some of the most important roles: marketplace product management and platform monetization, leading some of the most important products. And she's now the CEO of Ancestry.com. So you'd think that with this resume, this must have all come to her easily and that she could just parachute into any environment and feel at home. Well, of course you know, just from the way I said that that wasn't the case. So all of this led her to write Take Back Your Power, 10 New Rules for Women at Work. So Deb, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here, Karen.
So, okay, you are currently the CEO of Ancestry.com, but there is so much more that happened before that to get you where you are today. And that's what this book is about. So it's everything you learned on your road to becoming a CEO while raising a family and finding your voice. Let me just start near the beginning, when your family moved from New York to South Carolina, where you felt and were very much an outsider. And so how did that otherness shape you, for better or worse?
Yeah, I grew up in a place in a small town called Hanahan, South Carolina, where there were very few people who looked like me. I was my sister and I were the only Asian kids in our school for many of the years that we were there. And people felt the need to comment. I mean, I just remember walking down the street and having people shout at us, to my parents and me, go back to where you came from. And I used to joke, New York, because that's where I actually came from. And I was just, it was just really alienating to feel like the other all the time and to be reminded every day. And for me, that actually taught me a lesson that I learned the hard way, which is if I just became less, if I was just smaller, maybe, people wouldn't comment. And I realized what a disservice that did to my life, in that I became so good at getting things done, but invisibly. And I realized that once you get into the workplace, all bets are off. That what makes you successful in the workplace and what makes you safe in a town like where I grew up was very, very different.
Okay, so I'm just going to pull out some of the quotes from the book that really spoke to me and sort of along this line. Many women attend a meeting and leave never having uttered a word. Don't give yourself a free pass. And you quote Carol Isozaki, a well-known executive coach, who says, no one shows up to a meeting and says, I plan to add no value by being here. But by giving yourself a free pass, that's exactly what you do. So how did you get over that inclination, which you had, to say nothing, and that lack of confidence that your opinion mattered?
Well, I just remember when I went into consulting. So after I graduated with an engineering degree, I decided to go into consulting just to learn the ropes of business. And I remember getting my first bonus, and I didn't get the highest rating. And I was an overachiever. So I asked them, well, why? And they said, you're kind of bad at the client part of client service. You have to connect with people and spend time with them. And I said, but my work objectively stands on its own. And they said, that's not how it works here. And I had to learn the hard way that the steps that you take, what people are judging you on is not the objective work. It is both the work, but your ability to connect with others, to build relationships. And that was something which was a long journey for me. And I think as I grew in my career, I realized how much that the things that kept me safe, the walls that I built, were the things that actually kept me from being successful later in life. And so as Carol has said, Carol Isozaki talks about something she calls unintentional ridiculous strategies that women often employ in the workplace, right? You don't go to a meeting and say, hey, I'm just going to sit in the back and say nothing. Or I'm going to show up to the Zoom, but I'm going to have the camera off and I'm not going to say anything, as if I were not there. Mm-hmm. And yet we do that every single day. How many times do we walk out having made those choices? And so instead, what if we just were intentional about the choices we made? We said, I want to show up every time I show up, or I'm not going to be there. What if we said, I'm going to ask for that promotion, but I'm going to give them reasons to say yes? All those things I think we employ. I do think one of the things that we struggle with, and especially as a woman, especially younger in my career, I had this idea that I would use something we call strategic ambiguity, right? The strategic ambiguity is I don't want to ask for a promotion. I don't want to ask for a raise, because what if someone says no? Hey, Karen, are you gonna promote me this next cycle? And suddenly you're like on the other side of me, right? You're my manager. You feel like you have to say yes or no. But the safe part is to never ask you that question, but never know where I stood. But what if I said, instead of saying that, I said, hey, Karen, I've been working with you for a long time, and I'd like to know the steps you think it's going to take for me to get from here to the next level. And how can we partner so I can demonstrate those skills to get to the next level? Mm-hmm. And suddenly you're my ally, and you're actually not on the other side of me. You're actually partnering with me.
So that's a really important, well, you bring up a few important points. One is this hiding and thinking, oh, that's less risky. I always think, in fact, it's quite risky. To never take a risk is probably one of the riskiest things that you can do. But one of the things that you said just then about having allies, and you talk a lot about allies and mentors and sponsors. So it sounds easy when you just said it just now, but how hard did you find that to actually say, here's what I want?
Well, I think one of the things that really taught me a lesson, and I learned this lesson maybe the long way around, was several years ago, many years ago, actually, Sheryl Sandberg, and she was the COO of Facebook, and I was just a junior employee. I was the director. At that point, I managed a team of maybe 10 people. And she said, I would love for you to meet the CEO of Intuit, Brad Smith, and he wants to talk to you. And I said, great. And she said, and by the way, maybe he'll have a board seat open one day. You can join the board. And I just thought that was the craziest thing, because I was managing a small team. I clearly was not board ready. And 3 years later, actually, she introduced me to him again. And she said, he has a board seat open and he'd like to interview you. And I reflected on this experience recently when I was talking to Sheryl, and she said, well, you must have told me you want to join a board. I don't just go say that to random people. And so she said, but you told me what you wanted and I was on the lookout for you. And so I thought about that experience, and I think a lot about how many times we don't ask for what we want. We don't tell people what we want. We don't open ourselves up to the possibility. So rather than saying, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, make sure that you yourself are worthy of being mentored. Open yourself up to the possibilities. I think that is such an important thing that I have really learned much later in life.
So you talk about mentoring as sort of a two-way street, and mentoring and sponsorship. And first, if you could just delineate what the difference, as you describe it, between a mentor and a sponsor.
Well, so a mentor is somebody who gives you advice, and a sponsor is someone who opens doors. The way I describe, this is somebody can give you advice. You're trying to choose between two things, but they are giving you advice and they give you the opportunity to take it or leave it. A sponsor says, hey, I have this opportunity. I put your name up for this new role, this stretch project. I would love to see you succeed. Let's go do this together. A sponsor is somebody who puts their reputation on the line and says, I'm going to actually put your name out there, and succeed or fail, that's on me too. And so I think we need mentors in our life. We need objective observers to help us make those decisions, to help us understand where we are. But a sponsor is somebody who actually accelerates careers. The challenge we have actually in the workplace, especially for a lot of women, is that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. Men tend to have more sponsors just because people tend to sponsor people who look like them. This is more human nature. The challenge with finding a sponsor is that you yourself have to be worthy of being sponsored. You have to have somebody who looks for you, who looks out for you, and who believes in you even more than you believe in yourself.
Okay, so Sheryl promotes you or proposes you, I guess, for a board spot at Intuit, and it sounded like you had some trepidation. Am I ready to do this? I can't imagine a man saying, you know what, no, I'm going to hold off, I'm not quite ready. But right, okay, so now it's sort of, that seems ridiculous, but at the time, I'm sure it was sort of terrifying to you.
When she told me she wanted me to interview, part of me just didn't want to let her down. They were going to say no gracefully, but I didn't want to let her down, and I wanted to prove that I was worthy of her actually taking that opportunity, introducing me to him again. But to think that even years before, she said, this is a possibility in your future, made me want to be worthy of that as well.
I love her playing the long game. And in the book you talk about, okay, so you go into that interview and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to talk to him about his product and really sort of show where I can add value. And once you got in there and started doing that, did you feel like, all right, I can do this?
Actually, I love Intuit's products. I did my own taxes every year. And then when I got married, I did it for my husband. I used to do taxes for my family, my parents. And by the way, I still do my taxes on TurboTax. And I send a lot of feedback to the team. But I just love their products so much. I use QuickBooks and for my small business. And so I left it all in the field. And I remember just telling Brad, like, here are all the things I could see in your product. Here's the things I think are opportunities. And I never wanted to regret not having said something. And at the very end of the conversation, he said, would you like to join our board? And I was taken aback. I was actually very surprised. But it's been such an honor to help shape such an interesting company and to be on the board for the last several years. But I do think that sometimes we sell ourselves short. We hold back. We don't put it all in the fields. And my strategy was to say everything I wanted to say to the CEO of Intuit as a customer, as somebody who cares a lot about their product. And I did that. And that's a strategy that I maintain to this day, which is never have any regrets. Say what you want to say.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds like it comes easily to you now, but as one reads the arc of your story, right, you were very good at your job, parts of it, and then other parts of sort of the managing people, that came, it seemed, not so easily to you. There's one great quote where after a meeting, Sheryl Sandberg says to you, when are you going to stop fighting? You won. So what was your response to that?
Well, she saw the massive chip on my shoulder that I had. And as I told you how I grew up in a place where I was really different, where that was commented on all the time. The foods I ate were weird. The things I did, the things I celebrated, what I looked like, everything about me was foreign to this town. And I really struggled with that. And so I just had so much fight in me. And so that inspired me to graduate from high school, get a scholarship to college. I knew my parents couldn't afford, a great college. And so I got a scholarship to college, and then I went to consulting, and I went to business school, and I did all these things, and it was all about achievement. But I lacked the connection and relationships, actually. And that was the piece that I was really missing. And Sheryl saw that. She saw the fight, the competitiveness, the chip on my shoulder, which had actually been so instrumental in getting me to where I was. Until that day, she pulled me aside after a meeting and she said, you can stop fighting now, you've won. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't about fighting for my rights or anything like that. It was really fighting other people to say, I need to mark my space, to mark my territory. And she said, you know what? You can be gracious. I wish I could have said overnight everything changed, but actually as I processed it, it helped me understand that I no longer needed to fight the same fights that I've been fighting, because like everyone fights the last battle. Mm-hmm. I was fighting my entire childhood. And I needed to kind of change that. I needed to tear down that wall. And it took me some time to process that and to realize that what makes you successful in the workplace is not winning and getting everything right. It's actually building connection, because this is a team sport. Are you playing for the name on the back of the jersey or the one in the front?
Mm-hmm. Well, you said that it's not so much the work you do that's the most important, it's the team that you're on. And so you learn to sort of create a team. So by starting to be vulnerable, starting to show your emotions. Now that you've done that, does that feel easy and natural to you?
Well, it's funny. I remember telling somebody that when I was growing up, when I first started, I had a really hard time with being warm. And, there's been studies, and there's a publication in a Harvard Business Review that said men can be leaders if they're competent, but women have to be competent and warm. Now, the 2x2 matrix of whether you're competent and whether you're warm, there are people who fall into different quadrants, right? But everyone who's competent is seen as a leader if they're male. But as a woman, you're actually expected to also have this additional quality. Is that fair? Absolutely not. But at the same time, we look for warmth in women just naturally. And this is, by the way, both other women as well as men. And I really struggle with that. I was very foreign to other people. I was just, again, I held everyone at arm's length. And that was so difficult for me to actually embrace being warm. And so I decided to learn it as a skill. So I know it sounds crazy, but it's funny when I shared this story, so many of my colleagues said, but we would never have imagined that you weren't warm. But it was a skill that I had to learn, because I remember telling my coach, I feel like when I walk into a room, I'm squinting because I can't read people's emotions. And recently I was telling her this experience I had where I was doing a call. I do these coaching calls with various women. And I said, within 5 minutes of talking to her, I said, I think the problem is you actually are really alienated from your manager. And that's the question you're trying to ask me. And she said, how did you know? And I said, I could just tell. And I was telling her the story. And she said, think about what a long way you came when you said you couldn't read people in a room where you were sitting with them, people you knew, to meeting a stranger and within 5 minutes you could diagnose her biggest issue. And I said, I had not thought about it that way. And she said, that human connection, your ability to read the room, has changed so much in the time we've worked together. And I had not really reflected that much on that. And I realized that warmth is not about just what you say, it's actually how other people feel with you. And are you reflecting their emotion? Are you listening? Are you connecting? And it's such a different skill than something we teach. That's the hard skills of, doing PowerPoint and making Excel charts. It is something which is so important, though, in actually making teams work.
Yeah, I mean, it's central. They say people forget almost everything of what you say, but almost everything of how you make them feel. All right. And you did this all while you have 3 kids. So again, you quote Sheryl Sandberg, and you say the most important choice you'll make is who you marry. And you have a lot to say on marriage and kids and dividing the workload. But one of the things I found most interesting was the section on plan your marriage like you plan your wedding, which sounds so what? And then when you think about it, of course, but people don't. How did you come to that?
Well, I just remember reading about how people spend hundreds of hours planning every detail of one day, and they think nothing of the life choices they're going to make for the next 50 years. And so before we got married, we're Christian, and so we did pre-marriage counseling. We did a number of pre-marriage retreats, and you had to fill out a form that said, are you a morning person or a night person? Who's going to do the dishes in your house? Who wore the pants in your family? Just your cultural expectations. Who are you going to visit at Christmas? Your parents or his parents? And I just remember filling out that survey, and I realized something, which is I filled out a very similar survey to match with my freshman roommate at Duke. But how many couples actually do that? And we did that, and we realized his expectation, his dad managed their household. And so he expected to be the man of the house, whereas my mom ruled the roost. And we had to really talk through decisions and how things worked. And I had never used a dishwasher before we got married. And I told him this, and he did not. And we did not live together before we got married. And he said, I need to teach you how to use a dishwasher. This will revolutionize your life. But each of these small things are what trips people up in marriage. And yet, if I ask you what kind of flowers that you chose or the cake flavor, you know that, but you don't know who's actually going to have the expectation of who's doing what chore and how many kids do you want. And so one of the things that we really do is we chose to build our life together where we architect it and we negotiate everything. And then we trust each other to get it done all the way to the end.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you talk about the swim lane marriage.
Yes. Which
is sort of I'll let you describe it because it's a good concept.
Well, when you have a swim lane, like when you watch a competitive swimmers, they're each in their lane. They don't disrupt each other. They just trust each other. And we really have this, what we call a swim lane marriage. And we call it that because I see this where men and women, one of them manages the other person to do things. But we trust each other. For example, on vacations, my husband plans all of our vacations. And he hands me a Google Doc and says, here's where we're going and here's where you show up. And I make sure all the kids are packed, all the food we have food for everybody, and I take care of all the amenities around it. And so we just trust each other to not worry about that. I remember coming back from a 10-day trip. I was super tired. My husband says to me, okay, you have one or two choices. We have to finish our taxes and our son's essays are due for his college applications. Which one do you want to do? And I said, well, I definitely want to do our college applications because our taxes are very complex this year. And he's like, and then the next morning he woke up, he's like, actually, you're doing the taxes. You're on the board. So I did the taxes and I just had him look over it. It took us 15 minutes. I walked him through it. And then he worked with my son on his college applications and we didn't have to manage each other. I never looked at any of my son's college essays until they were done. He did not look at the taxes until I was done. And we had a rough couple of weeks, but we weren't all over each other. And I think this is the kind of thing where if you had a partner in your business, you have to trust them, the ebbs and flows of a relationship. And yet often in marriage, we feel like we need to manage each other. We need to micromanage each other. And we never have to do that in our relationship. And it has been so much more freeing. And it's so much easier actually to have a successful career when your partner is there and you know that they're going to be a net to catch things as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, just speaking, this is off on a tangent, but speaking of you doing your own taxes, which is just kind of crazy to me, obviously you have been at several right places at the right time and made, more money probably than you ever imagined. What do you do with that? How does that change your life? How do you think about that?
It's funny. I still drive a 12-year-old Hyundai that I got. And
you keep
I love
trading
it.
in for a 12-year-old one?
No,
or you age the one that you have?
Well, I met the CEO of Hyundai one day and I said, I've driven your cars for 20 years. And he said, oh, thank you so much for being a loyal customer and spending so much with us. And I said, actually, when I graduated from business school 20 years ago, I bought a used Hyundai Accent. And then I traded it in 12 years ago for a brand new Hyundai Elantra. And I've been driving it and I've had no problems. And I will probably drive this thing for the next 10 years. And he just smiled at me. So I just love just having simple things. Like, we live a very simple life and we don't need a lot of things. And my kids joke, this time, if we fly basic economy, so my husband has this thing about flying basic economy. And so, the kids joke, like, other people get to sit in the front. We don't even get to choose seats. But I think that sometimes it's not about how much money you have. It's really what choices you make. And so for our family, we choose to actually spend money on experiences, to actually invest in things that the kids will remember more so than any things that we can have.
So what do the kids, do you think that they want to follow in your footsteps?
Well, my kids used to joke, like, they said, why do people actually get drinks at restaurants? Because, you can have water for free. And I just remember thinking, I've been taught so well by my parents, who were very frugal because we were very poor growing up. And so my parents, we rarely went out to dinner, but we were never allowed to order drinks. And so, I feel like part of me is the chip off the old block. And part of me is like, wow, did I go too far? My kids wear clothes from Target and Costco and they're perfectly happy, but they also don't have those expectations. And so it's just something which I think passing along that the values that we have as a family. And my son said to me something like, well, I would say X, but it'd be against the Liu family values. So I wouldn't want to say that. I just thought that's so cute.
Yes.
Yes. I'm so proud that they, that money is a tool at some point in your life. It no longer becomes the thing that you're chasing.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, before we get to the lightning round, I want to just ask you one more question. Okay, you're the CEO of Ancestry.com, which is now private. It had been public, and Blackstone owns it now, and it may be public again. Who knows? But what is your vision? What do you want to do with this company?
Yeah, what I love about Ancestry is everybody has a family and a family story. There's a reason that you have the traditions that you have. There's all these stories that we're losing every single day. I lost my mom just a few weeks ago. And I just remember wanting to go through these photos. I started scanning her photos before she passed and I asked her about them. And every day we're losing the memories of those who are no longer with us. And so I want to capture those stories. And I had, parts of my family tell me stories about her before she passed as well. And so that I can capture it. And I want our ancestry is both our family history, but it's also living today in the choices that we make and the lives that we lead. And I think that's so important. And so one of the things that I've been doing as part of the company is it has been an activity where people build their family tree, they look at their family history. But what if we made it a family activity? To go from me to we, to go from a solo activity where you're documenting things with birth, marriage, death records to something which is a living history of your family, which is a real living thing. And capturing younger, people are learning from those who passed. I think that is such an important part of what we could provide to the world. And so, as we work on Ancestry, it's really about taking a company that's done amazing things for 40 years and making it so that people are collaborating with each other and building together.
Has it really been around for 40 years?
It has. We celebrated our 40th anniversary last year, actually.
That is amazing. I didn't know that. All right, so this is just Would You Rather. Only challenge is just answer the first thing that comes to your head. Okay, Facebook or Instagram?
Facebook.
Debate champion or class president?
Debate champion.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, would you rather speak in public or sing in public?
Oh, speak in public,
definitely. Yeah, it sounded like it. Okay, weightlifting or running?
Ooh, weightlifting.
Okay, dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Gmail or GChat?
Gmail.
Here's one I know the end. Vision Pro or MetaQuest?
Ooh, MetaQuest, of course.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Facebook Marketplace or eBay?
Facebook Marketplace.
Okay. Would you rather laugh uncontrollably or be moved?
Be moved.
Okay. Gears 5 or Overcooked 2?
Ooh, Gears 5.
Okay, I asked you that like I know what either of them are. They are two video games. All right. Fiction or nonfiction?
Ooh, nonfiction.
Okay. What are you reading now?
I am reading Losing Our Religion by Russell Moore.
Okay. What have you changed your mind about in the last year?
Hybrid work.
Okay. How is the thought changed?
I thought, at one point that we would all have to go back to the office, but I realized there's something special still about having people who gather even online. And so I think I'm much more open long term to hybrid work forever.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, last question. What is the best investment you ever made and the worst investment you ever made? In a very broad definition of investment. It could be anything.
Best investment I ever made is picking my husband when I was only 18 and we started dating when I was 19. So, and worst investment I ever made. I think the investment of time I put in. So I often regret when I watch a TV series and the ending is left hanging or is terrible. And now I have this rule with my husband, which is if the show doesn't have a good ending, I won't even start watching it because you get to season 3 and then it drops off and it's horrible. So time is more valuable than anything, any money.
Okay, so he needs to go explore it first. See what,
Yes.
okay.
It's satisfying enough that you can actually invest in it.
Okay, that I have not heard that answered. That is an excellent one. All right, last thing, Deb, where can people find you?
So I have a Substack, Deb Liu at Substack. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, all of the usual places. But if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, I have a Substack.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.